So I just ranted about my least favorite books of 2019 for 10 minutes. Hopefully I saved some energy to talk about my favorite books of 2019. So I'm going to give you my top 5 favorite books of 2019, and I'm so excited to talk about these because they were my favorite books from last year. And that's not to say, I almost don't want to make this video this early, not that it's super early, but there's still a couple weeks of the year, so I'm paranoid. I'm what if I come along a new favorite in the next 2 weeks? Okay, so I'm going to go from 5 up to number 1. My 5th favorite book from the year 2019 was Well Met by Jen DeLuca. So Well Met by Jen DeLuca came to me I can't even take myself seriously with this. So Well Met by Jen DeLuca came to me at the perfect time. So it's not, see, this is the hard part about this for me. I'm I'm going to talk about my favorite books. Well, a couple of them were complete crap probably, but they just came to me at the right time and they ended up getting 5 stars very subjectively. So Well Met is one of those books. I know it's not objectively the best book, and it's probably not really worth 5 stars, especially after watching some people's rant reviews, and I'm just yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, but I still love it and I still gave it 5 stars. Well Met by Jen DeLuca is about a girl who moves in with her sister to take care of her niece while her sister is recovering from a car accident. Her niece wants to volunteer at the local Renaissance fair, but she has to have an adult volunteer with her in order to participate, so Emily participates with her. She gets off on the wrong foot with the man in charge of running the Renaissance Fair. It's hate to love, my absolute favorite trope, so I am kind of biased already right there. And it just so happened that I read this book at the same point in time over the summer that I went to a Renaissance Fair and bought this fantastic cloak. So if you ever wonder where I got this cloak or why I wear this cloak, it's because I paid almost $200 for it at a Renaissance fair and I need an excuse to wear it so that it wasn't a waste of money. If you find yourself with plans to go to a Renaissance fair and you like contemporary romance, I would highly suggest reading this book either right before, during, or after your trip to the Renaissance fair. Maybe not during. That might be kind of weird to pay all this money to go to a Renaissance fair and then sit there and read a book. But yeah, I would recommend reading this book around the time you are going to an actual Renaissance fair, because then you will just feel so inside the story. And that's why I loved it. I loved it because while I was reading it, I felt like I was there with the characters because I had just experienced being at a Renaissance fair. Okay, coming in 4th place, it is another contemporary romance. I hate to love, of course. That is my absolute favorite kind of romance to read. And that is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I read this one back in May, I want to say, and I loved it. Is it objectively a 5-star read? Probably not, but I just enjoyed it. I had such a good time reading it that I definitely gave it 5 stars. This was an office romance. It involved 2 people that were kind of fighting for the same position. They worked at a publishing company, and there was one spot open for a promotion, and they were the 2 people kind of vying for that spot. So yeah, obviously they're going to be rivals, enemies, whatever you want to call it, but they also work in close proximity to each other. Yeah, they don't get along, and it's great. I loved it. If you're looking for something that's just fluffy and fun and full of ridiculous pranks and whatever, I really enjoyed this one. It was great. Number 3 is more recent, and that is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I loved this book so much. I already did a whole video dedicated to this book. It wasn't a review or anything, but I did a video dedicated to this book. I feel like I have already gushed about this book recently so much that I don't need to do it again. I'll link the video that I did up there, so if you want more details as to why I love this book, there you go. Yeah, it was just so interesting because I don't really think too deeply into the books that I read. I just kind of experience them along with the characters as much as possible. And this book in particular did that really well. The main character, Jason, he had no idea what was really going on. so I didn't really know what was going on, and you just got to kind of figure it out with him. This book is basically sold as, like, what would you do if you woke up in a life that wasn't yours? Like, your wife doesn't know who you are, your son was never born, like, what do you do? So it was just it was a really good time. I really enjoyed reading this book. And yeah, like I said, if you want to know more of my thoughts on that book and why you should read it, it'll be up there. Yeah, it was such a good book. I was rooting so hard for Jason. Like, I wanted him to figure out what was going on. I wanted to figure out what was going on. And I really enjoyed it. It was one of those books where you really didn't want to put it down because, like, the action kept going. Not necessarily that every page was like, bam, 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 action-packed. But, like, you just needed to know what happened next and what was going to happen and how he was going to get out of this. And, like, it was just so good. My second favorite book of 2019 was one I also read a little bit earlier. I think I actually read this in like February or something. And that is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. I loved this book. I loved the magic system. I loved the sword, which, if you haven't read the book, probably doesn't really make much sense to you. If you're not familiar with Sanderson, that probably doesn't make much sense to you. Okay, so Sanderson has this way of writing where you're meandering through the story and things are happening. Lots of things are happening, but it's just kind of slow paced. But after you've read more than one book from him, she says like she's an expert. I've read 2 of his books. But you notice the pattern of he does all of this setup, and the first like 2/3 to 3/4 of the book is setup and done in a... Oh, this isn't selling Sanderson at all. Done in a really interesting and engaging way. Like, you want to keep reading because things are happening, but they're happening kind of slowly, but in a good way, if that makes any sense at all. And then in the last third or like 1/4 to 1/3 of the book, he just like punches you in the face with all the action. Like, all of a sudden, everything is coming together masterfully. Like, all of these pieces that you didn't even necessarily realize went to the same puzzle, all of a sudden just like fit together perfectly. And it's just so well done. And I don't want to say like you have to get through the book to get to the ending that makes it all worth it. But it's almost like that. Like, not in a negative way. Like, you get to the end of his book and you realize why it's so worth it to read the rest of it. Like, the rest of it's good. Like I said, you're just slowly meandering. He's building you up to something. You might not even really be sure exactly where he's going with it. And then all of a sudden, oh, it's just so well done. And it's so good. And I love it so much. I read this book 10 months ago. I read this book in February, and I still get so excited when I think about the end of this book. It was so good. Like, those last 150 pages-ish were so good. I loved it so much. So this book in particular is interesting to me because the magic system is based on colors. And in order to use the magic system, you have to drain color from the objects around you so that you can use the magic. But then once the color's gone, you can't use the magic anymore because you've used up the color that is the fuel for the magic. But it's just really interesting. I thought that was fun. The sword, I love the sword so much. Through the whole book. That wasn't an ending thing. I love the sword. The sword's my favorite. I don't even remember what it's called. Like I said, it's been a while since I read this book. Nightblade? Nightshade? Nightblade. Nightshade. Night something. The sword's great. Even if you just read the book for the sword, like, I highly, highly recommend this book. I loved it. So that brings us to our final book on this list. My number 1 favorite book of the entire year. As if it's possible for me to get more excited about anything than I just got about Warbreaker. My number 1 favorite book of 2019 was Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch. Okay, yay, I get to gush about Gentlemen Bastards again. If you've seen any of my previous videos, you're probably sick of hearing about it by now. But I love this series. If I had really wanted to make this list boring, technically all 3 of the Gentlemen Bastards books could have been like 1, 2, 3, and then I only would have had to come up with 2 other books that I really enjoyed. But I figured that might be boring. So we're just going to lump all three of them into one. And I am going to talk about my absolute favorite one. So here's the deal. Sarah, why are you picking Red Seas Under Red Skies? That's the second book. Everybody knows that the second book is never as good as the first book. Yeah, well, let's talk about that for a second. So the reason I chose the second book instead of the first book is, number one, I didn't give the first book 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. And I've said multiple times in other videos, like, if I reread The Lies of Locke Lamora, it's a definite 5 star. And I keep thinking that maybe I'll just change my rating on Goodreads and just give it 5 stars. But, so, when I read The Lies of Locke Lamora, I had it in my mind that it was a heist story. It was sold to me as a heist story. It's marketed very aggressively, in the booktube community especially, as a heist story. So I went into it expecting a heist, and then within the first 3 chapters of the book, you're like, wow, they suck at what they're doing if this is supposed to be a heist story. So going into it thinking it was a heist story automatically kind of lowered my enjoyment factor of this book. By the time I realized it wasn't a heist story, then I was like, okay, but these characters are supposed to be doing a heist. They're kind of weird. While I was reading it, I didn't understand really what I was reading. I didn't understand the friendships and the complexities behind the friendships. I thought I was reading a heist story, and I know that I don't like heist stories, so that just kind of started me off on the wrong foot. And I don't think, honestly, I was expecting the vulgarity of some of the things that happened in that book. So it kind of caught me off guard. Not in a necessarily bad way. Like I said, I still gave this book 4 stars. I loved that book. But then I got to the second book, and it was like everything just kind of clicked. I was like, oh wait, this is who these characters are. This is how they're supposed to be. This is the relationship that they have. This is how you're supposed to look at them. And this is what this story is. And then it all just made sense. And I realized, oh, this is amazing. I love this so much. And so it's not even necessarily that the second book is objectively better than the first book. It's just that my enjoyment level skyrocketed through the roof for the second book because I realized what I was missing in the first book. And, okay, the friendship group in the Gentleman Bastard series is so well done. These characters are like family to each other, and they would do anything for the others. And it just hits you in I don't even know what I'm trying to say. I love it so much. I'm gripping my hand so tight because I just want to give spoilers, and I'm not going to give spoilers. But the love that these characters have for each other, you just really get to see it. And once you see it, it's there, and you're like, how did I miss this? How did I not realize that this was the closeness of their relationship? And I just love it so much. I love tight bonds of friendship in books. It's just so great. And even so I don't care. Coarse language doesn't really bother me at all. But there's a lot of swearing in this book. They use the F word probably 1,000 times in each book. But even that is so well done. The dialogue where he uses the coarse language is just so well done and fits the characters so well that it's not even offensive. Well, that's not to say if my mom read this book, she would be very offended. But it's just so good. So I'm going to try to edit this down because it is now 25 minutes long and I've just been sitting here gushing about this book for 7 minutes. But oh my God, I loved it so much. And again, like I said, I put Red Seas Under Red Skies as my number 1 book for the year because that's the book where it really clicked to me what was happening. But if I went back and reread The Lies of Locke Lamora, that would probably be my number 1 book because I would understand what I was reading now. And I wouldn't be thinking, oh, this is a heist story and it's not even a really good one. Okay, we're gonna end it here, because if I keep talking, I'm just gonna keep rambling about the Gentleman Bastard series. So we're gonna cut it. We're gonna cut it here. And yeah, so those were my top 5 favorite books of 2019. If there are any of these you haven't read, you should just read them, because they're great. If you're into romance, there's 2 for you. If you're into fantasy, there's 2 for you. If you're into sci-fi, there's 1 for you. Yeah, so if there are any of those 5 books that you're interested in that you haven't read yet, I highly, 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 highly recommend all of them. And if you've been thinking about reading any of them for a long time, just do it, because they're amazing. So yeah, that's it for this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.